Good morning, everyone. We will now very soon begin our technical session, which is on policy implications for water security and climate change. I think all the speakers, if you are sitting somewhere else, I request you to come to the front row. Either you can sit here or maybe here. Are you okay to sit here? If you won't like to sit here, you can take this seat also. The reason I am asking you to sit there is so that you can also watch the presentation. Yeah? All right. Okay, great. Okay. Okay, so welcome. And to my speakers, as you know that the time is limited, so you have kind of 10 minutes to present. And if you finish it on time, the incentive is that we allow the audience to ask you a question immediately. But if it goes beyond time, then we will have to take the next presenter and we will take the questions towards the end. But ideally, it would be really good if you present it on time and we can at least take one or two quick questions. Request to the audience is to keep the questions very brief so that they can respond. Okay, so let's begin. The first presenter is Chandrasekhar Bahinipati. And he's from Indian Institute of Technology, Tirupati, India. Chandrasekhar is going to talk about methodological challenges in assessing loss and damage from climate change, evidence from India. Over to you.
Okay, let it be here. Mike.
So she's the timekeeper.
Okay.
So you keep your eye on her. She will show you.
Okay. Okay. So good morning to everyone. So as mentioned by the chair, Professor Barua, so I'm going to talk on methodological challenges in assessing loss and damages from climate change evidence from India. So I would like to acknowledge OECD who has given the financial support to carry out this work. So given there's a time short, so I have to finish my presentation within the 10 minutes. I'd like to mention that although we don't have official definition in the UNFCCC report about the loss and damage, but if you look at the UNFCCC report, you'll find that they define the loss and damage is basically the actual or potential manifestation of impact associated with climate change in developing countries that negatively affect human and natural systems, including impacts from climate extreme events and slow onset events. So basically to understand that in a short language, it's basically impacts exceeding limits to adaptation. So basically residual risk, including unavoidable impacts. As you know that loss and damage debate was there since 1992, but basically it was largely discussed in the Bali conference and then WIM, Warsaw International Mechanism in 2013, and then largely discussed again the last two COP, basically in the Glasgow and in the Egypt. And Egypt we have basically establishing the fund for the loss and damages. Okay, although we have fund for the loss and damage, there's some amount in the $1 billion, but the question is from the developing countries that how to estimate loss and damages. Because you don't have estimations. Suppose you look at the slow onset disasters like salinization, sea level rise. Okay, you'll not get any estimation in India if you look at the searches in the Google. So you'll not find any estimation that, okay, someone estimated, okay, what could be the loss, what is even post-disaster loss, and because these are the slow onset disasters, because don't get the estimations. So my point is here, so which is basically presenting what are the methodological challenges. So why we don't have estimations? So because there's some kind of challenges we are encountering, that's why we don't have estimations. So this is the loss and damages in India. I just not interested to go through it because given the loss of time, because just want to mention that although we don't have estimations, we are underestimating several indicators we are not estimating, but if you look at the loss and damages are basically increasing over the years. So basically what we have now, so this is the figure I just put it. I just put the indicators, basically given the occurrence of the past two columns, basically given the extreme events and also slow onset disasters, what are the indicators with respect to direct economic loss and damages, indirect economic loss? Because as you know, there's two kinds of loss and damages. One is the economic, another is the non-economic. Economic loss and damages means the goods are basically traded in the market. You have some market value. Non-economic, the goods and services is not traded in the market, and you can't directly estimate any pecuniary or non-pecuniary terms directly. So those are basically considered non-economic loss and damages. So I've just put the indicators, the economic loss and damages, which are both in the direct as well as the indirect, and also non-economic loss and damages, both direct as well as the indirect, which are basically occurred because of extreme events and also slow onset disasters, which are basically estimated by the government reports. I just browsed state-wise the disaster assessment reports or the PDNA reports, see that, okay, what are the indicators they basically consider and what are the indicators they don't consider in their assessment reports. Okay, both in the government agencies as well as the individual research studies. So what are the methods we have to estimate the loss and damages? Basically, earlier we have basically a relief-based approach. Basically, we estimate loss and damages means number of people affected, number of houses damaged, number of livestock damaged, number of life damages. How they calculate the economic value? Basically, some of the three indicators. One is the houses damaged, damage to the public properties, okay, and damage to the agricultural output. There's three indicators. There's a summit, and they calculate the total economic loss and damages. How they calculate it is basically the compensation. The house is damaged, what are the amount they give the compensation to the private people, so that basically consider the damage to the houses. And agricultural loss, basically that's the compensation to the farmers. And also public properties, basically the repairment cost, because it's a public property. So what the cost involved in the repairing those properties, so that's basically considered as the damage cost. There's a summit. But if you, so when I was doing a survey in Tamil Nadu, so because they give the amount based on the kacha house, pakka house and semi-pakka house, there's some kind of fixed amount. It's not depending on the how much intensity of the damage, but they just give the fixed amount. So this amount is, they told like it's just can be 30 to 40% of the total amount of damage. You ask the people, okay, you got this much amount of money, which is sufficient to rebuild your house. They told, okay, just 30 to 40% of the total damage. So you can understand, okay, how much underestimation they're doing while estimating the loss and damages. So recently, last 5-6 years, we have also mainstreamed this approach like PDNA approach, post-disaster need-based assessment, which has basically tested in 2 cases in India. One is the Kerala flood in 2018 and the Odisha cyclone Fani in 2019. So we have also developed a climate risk management framework, which is basically developed jointly with NIDM and GIZ India, and where I have also involved for the Tamil Nadu, Odisha and Uttarakhand, we have basically tested the CRM framework for few states. So this is the CRM framework, so this was basically developed and we have also submitted our paper. So basically this is 7-8 steps, so I'll not go through much detail. So what are the major challenges we face? Okay, although we have estimating, so what is major challenges? As I already mentioned, for the slow onset disasters, we don't have estimations. Okay, and given we have estimations for the rapid disaster like cyclone and flood, the most of the indicators are not considered. Okay, the most of the indicators I mentioned, those are not considered, those are not estimated. And the third thing that, okay, and for each disaster, we consider the different kinds of indicators, different kinds of methods we adopt. So it's not comparable. Okay, some years we'll adopt the PDNA approach, some years we'll adopt the relief-based approach. How can you compare that, okay, whether the loss and damage is increasing or decreasing? Okay. So what are the methodological challenges with respect to estimating the economic loss and damages? I just mentioned with respect to the PDNA approach, the first challenges is that inadequate baseline data for the socio-economic, demographic and ecosystem services. Okay, so when you don't have a baseline information, so what are the resources in that, there in that particular affected area? Okay, so how can we estimate what we lost? Okay, so basically we don't have the information about what is there. Okay, then it's very difficult to estimate what is lost. So which is basically, I'll give a simple example. So if you look at the city like Surat, Bangalore, Chennai or Mumbai, okay, which are basically experiencing flood. There's a large number of floating population, the migrant workers. Okay, they're coming there to work for 2-3 months in a year or 5 months in a year. But suppose in that time when they are basically present there, some flood hits to that particular city. So what will happen? Their identity is somewhere else, X city or X village. Okay, but how about when the flood actually hit that particular city, they were there. Okay, but the disaster assessment report doesn't cover them, loss and damage to them, because they are not there. Because at the time, what is the proof that they were actually present there? So there is no proof that they're actually present in that particular city. So that's why we don't have similarly many socioeconomic indicators or many demographic indicators or ecosystem services with respect to the non-economic loss and damages. We don't have that indicators. And also lack of qualitative information on the vulnerable communities regarding their social conditions and human development indicators. Second thing, that when it comes to the calculate the impact different sectors, okay, calculate the impact for the different sectors. So it is what is happening here. So during the Fani cyclone, I was talking to them that, okay, how you calculate for the different sectors. So when they calculate for different sectors, there could be possibility of spillover impact, spillover double counting. Something will be considered in the one sector, and same thing will be considered in the second sector also in the calculation, the loss and damages. So they are looking at how we can consider that there should not be any double counting, how we'll consider the spillover impact. That's also another major challenges while estimating. And the third was that suppose you calculate each sector wise, how to get value for them. Okay, suppose you want to see that, okay, these are the damages we consider, these are the indicators, how to get a value in terms of price. So with rest, yeah, I'll just finish within 3 minutes. Okay, with reference to the sector-wise impact, so first thing is how to pricing the loss and damage indicators and avoid the double counting and clear identification of the loss and damage indicators. So another thing I'll just mention that, as you know, GDP. So if you look at how they calculate the sector-wise impact, they look at the sectors-wise contribution to the GDP, either the country GDP or the state GDP or the district-wise GDP. So what is the major challenge? Because that is required for the fund allocation. Okay, for after the flood, cyclone, and drought, there is a fund allocation, so that they need to calculate as per the sectors mentioned in the GDP. So therefore, what is happening? Suppose in a cyclone or flood, hits a few districts, but however, we don't have information on the district-wide GDP. We have information on the state GDP. So then it's very difficult for the policymakers or anyone is calculating the loss and damages. He'll ask, okay, how can I calculate? Because I don't have information about how much each sector contributed in the district. So how can I calculate how much loss and damages? So they're trying to take lots of assumptions to get actually district-wide GDP. Okay, which is distributed domestic product. So these are the major challenges. I'll just mention given the paucity of time, I'll just go to the non-economic loss and damages. So what are the major challenges in the non-economic loss and damages? I'll just mention that. One is the conceptualization. Okay, so which are the non-economic loss and damages? Okay, the conceptualizing each indicators. And the second, that accounting methods to monetize it. So how to monetize those indicators. It's major challenges, okay, how we can monetize those indicators. The third one is the attribution. So most often what is happening, people are not able to relate the loss and damage indicators with the climate change or the disaster. Because most of the non-economic loss and damages are basically generic in nature, like dropout of children. It's a generic in the rural India, the dropout of, I'll just take 1 minute, okay. Dropout of children is just generic in nature. A migration is a generic in nature. So it's very difficult for the people to relate that, okay, dropout of children or the migration is because of drought. Okay, it's a statistical attribution issue. And also there's also context dependent, how you value resources. It's varied from one place to another place. So these are the major challenges we have to estimate loss and non-economic loss and damages. So what are the conclusions I have? So basically in the loss and damage being defined differently at the international level as well as the national levels. So therefore, although we have the transparency agreement through the basically all the countries submit loss and damage figures at the international platform, the UNFCCC. So it should suggest that, okay, I should suggest that, okay, the UNFCCC should made it mandatory for the developing countries or the countries to submit at least the non-economic loss and damage figures. That still now it's not mandatory. As long as they make it mandatory that, okay, you should submit the NELD figures, so that there will be some kind of advancement in the knowledge and some kind of effort should be go towards to actually made it. Okay, so there are other things I have just mentioned it because you are not reading it because of time. So here I have just given the policy suggestions. The nations at present should provide the L&D information through a transparency framework to the UNFCCC, but there is no compulsion to furnish the NELD information. Henceforth, at the international level, supply of the NELD information as part of the national communication to the university should be declared compulsory, and the WM should encourage all the nations to include omitted ELD indicators as well the NELD indicators while furnishing the loss and damage information under the transparency framework. And further, given the non-availability of definition and methods for estimating loss and damages in the UNFCCC documents, it is being defined in different ways, and various methods are being adopted across the nations. And this gives an unbalanced and inaccurate representation of the true loss and damages. Thus, this paper advocates for the formulation of definition and guidelines for calculation under the UNFCCC. So I'll stop it. I'd like to mention that this paper is already published last week. So thank you. So hopefully I have not taken much time.
Just 1 second. So thank you so much, and I think it's a very interesting presentation because loss and damage is something that we are discussing now. If you do not really have a right way of calculating it, then how do we actually understand the finance that we are asking for? So is there any quick question, follow-up question on what? Okay, there are 3 questions. You have to be really, really quick, very quick, so that we can call the next presenter.
Very quick question. How loss and damage, especially because we are talking about disasters specifically, how are they different from post-disaster recovery estimations, especially if we are not considering non-economic loss and damages?
Okay, my question is, given the record of loss and damage negotiations since WIM was set up, why should any country wait for the UNFCCC loss and damage definition?
Okay. Yeah, sure.
I take one step back from the more detailed, more broader question, also referring to COP27, some progress towards loss and damage and compensation, but also, for example, the director of the Potsdam Institute for Climate Impact Research saying the 1.5-degree target is politically dead. So how this goes together, and what are your expectations from the outcomes of COP27? Thank you.
So, can I? Okay, so given the paucity of time, let me answer this. Given a short answer, I can talk to you during the lunch time. So, yeah, the recovery estimations is still there. Okay, not in the climate change discourse, but the disaster discourse, how they estimate the loss and damages. Basically, what they are doing, till now, suppose you look at the UN ECLAC framework. Okay, this is basically the states are adopting. Okay, following the PDNA approach, is basically situation needs plus the recovery. Okay, situation needs is the loss and damage. Recovery is basically the second thing. But they're not considering the limits to adaptation. Okay, that is not there. So that's why I'm thinking that, okay, there should be one definition rather than the disaster discourse definition, climate change adaptation discourse definition. There should be one definition, and where, so because while the reviewers and the fighting with the reviewer to publish this, so always there's a tussle is going on, okay, how the states are defining loss and damages, the country is defining loss and damages, how the international platform is defining, so how it can be linked, okay, and therefore I was just suggestion that, okay, if there is a one definition, one methods, okay, so that all the states should adopt that, okay, so that we should have a figures, otherwise some states are adopting some other approach, relief-based approach, some are doing the PDNA approach will adopt when there's a bigger disaster, and when the ADP or the World Bank is involved in the estimation. Because both the studies, both the places I'm referring, Kerala as well as the Odisha, where the ADP involved. So I'll take it. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Chandrasekhar. May I now invite the next presenter, Alicia Anahe. Hi. Come, yeah. So you have, yes. Okay, so over to you, 10 minutes.
Okay, hi, good morning to everyone. I'm so happy of being here, so I want to start by thanking the sponsors and the organizers of the conference, so thank you very much. And my topic is integrated urban environmental water management for resilience, transversalization for disaster risk reduction and climate change adaptation. Okay. So what I'm basically presenting is a management approach which integrates urban environmental and water institutions in order to mainstream nature-based solutions and thus reduce disaster risk and also foster adaptation to climate change. So we know that cities face major natural hazards and also societal challenges, and also they have they are very complex urban socio-ecological systems. Plus, we have uncertainty about climate change. That's why nature-based solutions, green infrastructure, and also blue infrastructure can contribute to foster sustainability and resilience. But those need to be properly mainstreamed through urban environment and water public officers who are responsible of managing such resources. And through a transversalization of these institutions, we can contribute to reduce disaster risk and also foster adaptation to climate change. So that's the idea. And we know that cities are very reliant and dependent on ecosystems for providing them with resources and other benefits that we require for existing. But several social processes also generate unhealthy ecosystems, and this begins a vicious cycle that ends up in habitat loss, habitat fragmentation, habitat degradation, and biodiversity loss. So we need to change this pattern, and the possible solution, well, nature-based solution, which is which foster disaster risk reduction and also climate change adaptation. Well, I guess by now you all know the definition from UCN that says that nature-based solutions, well, are actions to protect, sustainably manage, and also restore natural or modify ecosystems in order to assess societal challenges effectively and adaptively. And thus provide biodiversity benefits and human well-being. Okay, so but what does it take to mainstream these nature-based solutions? The problem with these solutions is that they are not very well documented. I mean, we are all working on that, but as public officers, policy makers are usually are more used to gray infrastructure approaches because what they remain being seen as the first defense line against hazards, natural hazards and also disasters. But infrastructure also has also a problem as it is aging, and it can exacerbate risk. I mean, by aging, it means that it requires more and more proper restoration and financial resources for modernizing it. So in case there are no sufficient financial resources, well, it can exacerbate also disaster situations. So three possible solutions that can be applied to avoid this problem with policy officers are developing technical and scientific references, engaging multiple actors and partners, and also developing financial and support and markets. So when we're talking about developing technical and scientific references, it means that we require more empirical cases, which means that we need more studies, more diagnosis, and also more monitoring and more evaluating. Also, it requires more cost-benefit analysis, as it is easier to apply a solution that you know that can work and that can avoid side effects and side economic effects. And this is also like a shift from reactive disaster management to a preventive disaster risk management. And it also requires strengthening international cooperation and collaboration. Well, we also need to develop financial support and financial markets. Otherwise, investors from private sector will not be, will hesitate about these emergent markets. And the third one is developing interdisciplinary and cross-sectoral management with multiple actors and partners. This involves creating two parallel pathways. The first one is fostering a long-term relationships among stakeholders and actors, and also identifying and working with a clear champion. And in this context is where this with this management approach is proposed, because by integrating the urban, the environment, and the water resources managers, we will have a better horizontal integration at the local level, and this can contribute to reduce disaster risk reduction and also foster adaptation to climate change. So what does it mean? The idea is that if an area gets flooded, it should be planned to be flooded, and also when planning a city, we need eco-hydrological studies, so that we know how this is going to contribute to water filtration or water runoff. So also this management approach should be fostered by public policy. The ideal scenario for this would be like having a national strategy that allows mainstreaming ecosystem-based solutions. However, we know that this is way too complicated. I mean, it's not impossible, but it's something that is just beginning. But we can start locally. And by starting locally, we mean involving those three areas: environmental management, urban planning, urban management institutions, and also water resources management institutions. And such governmental institutions should have a common background of public policy that allows applying disaster risk reduction and ecosystem-based adaptation approaches. This must be also supported by financing institutions that allow investments from private sector, and also supported by academia. So all in all, there is an urgent need of implementing nature-based solutions to enhance cities' sustainability and resilience. And implementing a transversal management approach can allow mainstreaming nature-based solutions, but this is still a challenge that must be adopted by local public policy. And the good thing about this mainstreaming of nature-based solutions is that at least major efforts are being done at the global scale, such as this conference, which allows to collaborate and also to exchange lessons learned from different parts of the world, and also allow to have more experience about what can be done in other parts of the world. So future research involves actually working with regional, local governments from Peru and Mexico. This is at the first step of a larger research, which involves actually finding proper recommendations to reinforce public policy, and if possible make a change or a shift in the national strategy. But it's still something that needs to be worked locally, and then from a bottom-up approach. So thank you very much.
Thank you, Alisa. Again, is there a quick question? Because a very interesting presentation on nature-based solution. Okay. You have.
As a quick comment, I will a little bit be provocative with you. I'm saying we don't need more studies and more evidence. The evidence is there since the 70s, Limits to Growth Club of Rome. But how to bring this into implementation, and also your cost-benefit analysis, I would say it's not that it has to be done, but how to calculate this, and maybe you're aware of these. The economy of biodiversity, which was the author, I always forget his name, Sir Dasgupta from Cambridge University, published in 2019, because we have to reverse our economic thinking to some extent and not look at GDP. So my point is, Not more evidence, the evidence is there, translate it to the people who can make a change. Thank you.
I have a very quick question which you need not answer right now. What I want to know is, do you know of any studies that can compare the nature-based solutions such as sponge cities or heat action plants versus the traditional infrastructure-based solutions that municipalities have been using in urban situations? And if you have those studies that can compare them both ecologically and economically, I would love to get the reference. Thanks.
Okay. Well, if I understand it right, it's like there is already some evidence that can compare economic and ecological studies. So at least in the case study of that I am checking right now, it's like very poor. Like there are no actually like evidence like in the regions of Amazonas and San Martin, and also in Tabasco, Mexico. Well, Amazonas and San Martin in Peru, and Tabasco in Mexico. It is quite hard to find that kind of study. I mean, it's even hard to find information about what can about how the situation is currently. So in this context, what I am trying to research is how is the current status of resilience and how it can be changed by a shift in the public policy. But yeah, I mean, for those cases, no.
Thank you so much. So maybe there will be some more questions towards the end. So yeah, thank you so much. Yeah. Okay, can I invite now the third presenter, Daniel Tesfa, who is going to speak on water security in Eastern Nile countries. 10 minutes? There is that clock.
Yeah. Okay, a little bit too late to say good morning, and a little bit early to say good afternoon. I will say hi. Thank you, Professor, for introducing me. Like 2 weeks or 3 weeks ago, I was in Khartoum, Sudan for water diplomacy, and one presenter on this food nexus, energy, food, land nexus, he started his presentation with the energy we get from our sun for 2 minutes is equivalent to the energy consumption for the whole planet for 1 year. So we have, if you harness the energy part, we are okay. But for water is really very scarce natural resource. It is not that, the case is not like that. Unless and otherwise we are very efficient in converting this ocean water to pure water. My presentation is water security in Eastern Niles. First I have to this thing is not working. Yeah. The Eastern Niles comprise Ethiopia, Sudan, and Egypt. As we may know, the upper country is Ethiopia, and the lower downstream countries Sudan and Egypt. In Ethiopia, we start constructing a big dam for hydroelectric power production. Then there is a little bit misunderstanding or a little bit of concern for the downstream country, Sudan and Egypt. So first I want to show this audience what is the basic line, what is the water security at present. So I will compare these 3 countries, Sudan, Ethiopia, and Egypt, the water condition as of
as of now. Okay, I will pass some of this drinking. I take 10 components for comparing these things: drinking water, hygiene and health, water use efficiency, water quality, water disaster risk, sanitation, irrigated land, water infrastructure, water governance, and physiography. 10 components, and I will use indicator for each of them, 1 or 2 indicators. Then I will rank each component's 10 points. If it is all 10 points, the maximum point is 100. So this is not complicated, very simple presentation. 10 components, 10 points, then 100 points. How Egypt, Ethiopia, and Sudan make these components. I said this already. So for example, when I say one of the components is drinking water, what is the percentage of population using at least basic drinking water? What is basic drinking water? Just with water with pipe or well-maintained well, things like that, okay? For sanitation or for irrigated land, what is total irrigated land per capita? Water use efficiency, the same indicator. What is the water use efficiency? Storage per capita. So we compare these 3 countries with this indicator, okay? So for example, for the first components, if the number of population is less than 45%, we get nice water, we get score number 1. If it is 90% of the population, greater than 90% of the population get good drinking water, we get 5. This is so simple. So scoring system for example, the water quality, how many people die due to diarrhea, less than 25%, 5, greater than 100%, 1. Okay? If the score is with 5, we multiply it by 2 later to make it 10. Okay? Irrigated land, 1.8 for Sudan, Ethiopia 1, it is in million hectares. So more irrigated land, the indicator will be, if it is greater than 4, 5, less than 1, 1. Okay? The scoring system for water use efficiency, as you see, it's also, the first one is less than 5, not greater than 1. There is a typo there. So it is 1 score, and if it is greater than 60, it goes on like this. Let me go directly to, yeah, the national water security score. If it is the average out of 100, greater than 90, is a good model, rank number 5. Between 75 and 90, it's okay. Less than 45 is not okay. Imagine this is just basic things, basic drinking by SDG 2030. Every country is supposed to have these things. So when we come to Eastern Nile countries, for example, drinking water, Sudan and Ethiopia is very low. Egypt, 100%, okay? It's very exemplary. We want to be like Egypt, for example. For percentage of population, sanitation, very poor. Sanitation like washing hands, toilet, and things like that. How many percentage of the population? Egypt, again, 100%. Ethiopia and Sudan, very low again. Hygiene and health, the same thing. Ethiopia is very low, Sudan is okay, and Egypt is like 85% or 95%. Total irrigated land per capita, again, Sudan is good in this one. Ethiopia is poor, but Egypt is in between. So we go like this, indicator water use efficiency. All Sudan, Ethiopia, and all the other are not good on this respect. Okay, Then we go like this, water storage per capita. Ethiopia and Egypt is good, Sudan is not good. Percentage of water treated, you know, after using the water for whatever reason, the percentage of water treated is poor. Sudan and Ethiopia, Egypt is good. Then finally, the water resource management, integrated water resource management implementation. Ethiopia is good in this regard, but Sudan is a little bit not better. Disaster risk index, the same. Then at the end of the day, we want to compare all these three things. Sudan, Ethiopia, Egypt, even Egypt is 75%, supposed to be 100%. The case is very worst in Ethiopia, 40%, a little bit better for Sudan. In conclusion, except for Egypt, even that is supposed to be 100%, but Ethiopia and Sudan scores very low. This is all my presentation. I try to avoid this front row questioning, but still I have 1 minute, so.
I know it is really bad. It's just clicking on your Thank you so much. Yeah, okay. So there are 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 questions. Quickly, you have to be quick with your questions. I'll give it to you. You can take all of them together. And
Thank you for a very interesting presentation, but also being very modest on the little bit conflict between the countries, which is not true. My question is, and it's not directly related to what you presented, but also connected to your final slide. Sudan and Ethiopia are kind of ranked quite equally in your analysis, but still Sudan is taking or going along with Egypt in terms of contestation, especially considering the Jerd is a symbol of water security and energy security in Ethiopia. Could you please reflect on that?
Okay, previously you're right, Sudan and Egypt align with Ethiopia. To give you background, as I said before, there is a big dam called GERD, and the downstream countries are a bit worried about that, but GERD is producing hydroelectric power and releasing the whole water together. Recently there is a shift. In fact, even more than Ethiopia, Sudan is benefiting from this. For agriculture, the water is regulated after generating power. The water is regulated, so Sudan is very advantageous for this one. I don't know why sometimes they ally with Egypt, but you know, that's a problem with that one. Another question.
Hi. My question is, I think what I understood, if I understood it right, the total irrigated land per area, per capita, sorry. So in your case, if it's higher, it's better. If it's higher, it means that it is more water secure.
If the first I calculate the total land.
Yes.
Then I calculated, then I divided by capita.
Yes.
So the scoring is 1, 2, 3, 4, 5.
Yes.
So if the country uses more water,
yes,
for agriculture,
yes,
I gave it high score. The country,
yes,
the country uses because that means the country have more water, more secure.
But I would think that the opposite is true, so because if the land is not irrigated, we have sufficient precipitation, for example. So it's we do not need irrigation.
You're right. Next, what I am thinking was to include the rain-fed agriculture.
Yes.
And that's a really very nice question. And power generation also in this components. And then it may go just like you said. If more there is more rain-fed agriculture or more power generation. So I will use 3 indicators for one component and aggregate all those data. Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, Daniel.
Ah, my Egyptian friend.
Okay, you are welcome. I will not go through any kind of discussion, just only I'd like to ask you, what about the source of this data?
So,
You give us a lot of results, but you didn't mention here in any slides the sort of data, how would you calculate your conclusion?
where is my, yeah, can you, the first, sorry, because it is, I'm going up or down. Yeah. The presentation use online available data, water security in Africa, a preliminary assessment.
Daniel, look, there is no problem for me. This dam for as a power source and this river is our life. There is no issue. I would like to ask, you make a lot of conclusions depend on source of data. The source just online or official data? This is my question.
It is
Thank you.
online. The presentation is online available data. I don't know whether it is official or not, but it is publicly defended, but it is available online. It is done for all of Africa. I just take it out for our region.
No problem, no problem.
Thank
Just
you.
only to
Thank
ask
you.
about the calculation.
Thank you. Thank you very much for interesting. Okay, you also have one. Oh, just 1 second, 1 second. Let's just take one.
That's why I use my 10 minutes.
You did a good job by giving us
Yeah, so in your analysis, the water efficiency of 3 countries are same, while the Egypt has some indicators they are a little bit far ahead, maybe in terms of the reuse of water. So just want to know the reasons in behind why the water efficiency of these countries are in the same line, like especially the Egypt.
Yeah, I get the question. Water efficiency, you're right, they start, but for all of them, the water, for example, in irrigation, water efficiency is very poor in Egypt, in Ethiopia, in Sudan, maybe 20%, 30%. Supposed to be for surface irrigation, supposed to be like 40% to 50% globally, but in our region, it is very poor. So if they gain something from for a reuse system, they will lose it in irrigation, furrow irrigation or something like that. Thank you very much.
Yeah, last question. Sorry. Thanks for your presentation. And just I have a general question. Whatever the analysis you did, and you are staying, if I am right, you are in Ethiopia. So how you correlate the analysis, which you found in respect of drinking water, whatever the indicator which you have taken, because the sources is online and you don't know the authenticity of that online data. It is a
when I say the source is online, it is publicly defended.
okay. That means public data.
Yeah.
Okay. So
when I say online, you can get it. For example, it is done for the whole of Africa.
So staying into the Ethiopia, how you the result is, how real the result is.
Do you agree with the result?
The result
Yeah.
which you have.
Yeah, I will agree with the result. Some of the results are not okay. Some with my own data, but I present it just like for the whole. I didn't touch any of the data. I presented as it is here.
Okay, thanks.
Thank you very much.
Thank you so much. Okay, great. Let's just move on, and we have our next presenter, Vishal Narayan, who is going to talk on gender, water security, and climate change from a peri-urban perspective. 10 minutes, and your clock is.
Okay.
Yeah, just move.
just move to the next slide. Maybe the first one is blank. Just click once. Yeah, that's it. Okay, so good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to my talk. In many ways, it's quite different from the talk that happened just before me. Is it better now? Yeah, okay. Yeah, so it's on gender, water security, and climate change, a peri-urban perspective. And basically, what I'm talking about in this paper is what are the gender dimensions of water insecurity that is induced by urbanization and climate change in a peri-urban context. So we talk about water security, we talk about urbanization, we talk about climate change, but men and women don't experience the world in the same way. Yeah, so all the kind of climate change impacts that we talk about are differentiated along lines of caste, class, gender. So what are the gender dimensions of water insecurity that is experienced in peri-urban spaces as a result of the forces of urbanization, climate change? That's what my paper is about. So what I'm doing here, basically, it's in a way it's a conceptual paper, and I'm drawing on my past work where I looked at water insecurity in peri-urban context and what were the gender dimensions of that, okay? And also I want to make some connection in this research with the discourse on climate justice, and I want to, so for instance, Stephens argues that we need to steer away from the discourse on what she calls climate isolationism, which sees climate change as a kind of a technical phenomenon, yeah, divorced from the social context in which its effects are experienced. That can be tackled through efforts at mitigation and adaptation. So Stephens has argued that you have to look at climate change as a structural problem whose effects are experienced within a social context of structural and social relationships, right? And I draw on my research in Gurgaon and Mukteshwar in India. Okay, so just to say a little bit about peri-urban spaces, it's a very confusing term, peri-urban. There is no consensus regarding its meaning, but broadly it refers to a space in transition that combines both rural and urban characteristics. So even though the most widespread connotation of the term is spatial, in the sense that we use the term to refer to spaces at the periphery of cities, in some of my recent work I've argued that the coexistence of the rural and the urban that we talk about as referring to the peri-urban can even be found in the heart of the city, given the way cities of the global south are expanding, right? Likewise, we've been talking about water security and water insecurity. Again, that's a term which has no consensus regarding its meaning. But in a peri-urban context, we've used this term not so much to quantify water security in terms of indicators or measurable indicators, but more to denote, more to talk about the processes that cause populations inhabiting peri-urban spaces to lose access to water as the city expands, because a lot of the urban expansion takes place by acquiring the land and water from peri-urban spaces. Yeah, gender. So again, gender conceptually refers to the socially defined norms of what it constitutes to be a man or a woman. And we always start a discourse on gender by distinguishing it from sex, which refers to the biological features that distinguish to the physical features that are assigned to us at birth, whereas gender is a social meaning that's assigned to those physical features in terms of what men should do and what women should do and how men should behave and how women should behave. However, as a social category, gender becomes meaningful only when you look at it from a lens of intersectionality, looking at how gender intersects with other axes of social differentiation, like in Indian context or Nepal, caste, but also maybe color of skin, ethnicity, age, and marital status, okay? In the recent years, there has been a lot of interest on issues of peri-urban water security in the global south, including some of my own work, where we've looked at how the expansion of the city causes peri-urban communities to lose access to water, but there has been very little attention to the gender dimensions of this, which is what I want to focus on in my research. Okay? Right. So the research I'm drawing upon is located in two very distinct contexts in India. One is a city of Gurgaon, which is basically, which has basically emerged as a rapid recreation, outsourcing, and industrial hub in the last 2 decades, and expanded mainly by acquiring the land and water from the peripheral villages. The other is Mukteshwar, which is a hill destination in northern Indian state of Uttarakhand, which has seen a lot of land use change in recent years because on account of its pristine beauty and nice climate, it draws a lot of tourists and urban elite who've acquired plots of land to build cottages, tourist resorts, and hotels. Okay, so what are the ways in which gender relations are being transformed? So this is a paper, Sumit Vij is my co-author, he's here in the audience. And so this was a village where we worked a few years ago in Gurgaon. And you know, as the city of Gurgaon was expanding, a need was felt to expand the water supply infrastructure. And the urban authorities did that by acquiring the land, the grazing lands of village Budhera to build a water treatment plant there, right? And Budhera was a highly livestock-dependent village. And so many households had to cut back on their livestock population, but households who could not afford to cut back on the livestock population responded by switching from grazing to stall feeding. So what had happened here was that, so in this part of the country, the task of taking the livestock out to graze is the responsibility of men or of professional herders, while as stall feeding or collecting fodder to bring it home is the responsibility of women. So what happened here was that as the household switched from grazing to stall feeding, it increased women's responsibilities in collecting fodder, adding to women's burdens in natural resource collection. So these are the unintended impacts of the expansion of water infrastructure to meet the needs of the city on gender relations around natural resources. This will not hit, you know, an urban planner, but this is how the ecological footprint of the city is born and how that has gendered impacts. Okay. The second village I'm talking about is Sultanpur, also located in Gurgaon. And as I said, that intersectionality is important. And what happened in Sultanpur is that among the upper caste women, the tasks of the upper caste families, the Rajput families, the tasks of collecting water have historically not been done by women, but by men. But there was a lot of land use change here, and there was a kind of a forced occupational diversification, and men started commuting to the city to work. So they had not migrated, but they would move up and down between the village and the city of Gurgaon. And when that happened, the women would not wait for the men to come back home to collect water, right? And the women from the upper caste families also started venturing out to collect water. So this is another way in which we see gender relations around water getting transformed. So whereas women in the upper caste families earlier did not collect water, yeah, now with men moving to the city, this was one more responsibility for women to do. Yeah. The third research context is that of Mukteshwar. I'm just looking at the clock. And Mukteshwar, as I said, is a scenic hill resort, is a scenic hill station in North India where there has been a lot of land use change in recent years to, as I said, to build resorts and tourist complexes. And so historically, a lot of the water that the local communities used was sourced from springs, yeah, from mountain springs. And a lot of the land use reallocation took place was of land that was located near the springs, yeah, causing again women to lose access to water, causing again local communities to access water. So, and local narrative spoke a lot about, say, changing precipitation patterns. So a reduced rainfall, a reduced snowmelt. So on the one hand, due to climate change, there is a change in precipitation patterns. So there are changes on the supply side, and there are also changes on the demand side, which happen basically through a land use change, yeah, because of which local communities lose access to water. So this was documented in a paper that was published in the journal Land Use Policy, where we showed how urbanization and climate change intersected to increase, again, women's water burdens, women's burdens, time and effort in collecting water. Okay, so then what I want to argue is that this kind of research that looks at how urbanization, climate change together intersect to shape water security, insecurity, has gendered impacts, can help us conceptually develop a typology of ways in which gender relations get transformed through urbanization, climate change, induced water insecurity. And so from these three cases, we clearly can enumerate three different ways. One is that through the creation of water infrastructure, that has unintended impacts on gender relations around natural resources. Through land use change and occupational diversification, that again causes women's water burdens to increase. And through the intersection of urbanization and climate change, that again increase water burdens. So in the last 30 seconds, so what are the confusions? What are the conclusions? So as I said that, there's an argument that you have to look at climate change not as an isolated phenomenon, technical process that we study merely through projections, forecasts, and then which we think that we can address through mitigation and adaptation, but rather look at it also in the social and agrarian context in which its effects are felt. And climate change and urbanization processes strongly deepen social inequalities. And I think that a study of the transformation of gender relations in a context of urbanization and climate change can provide a strong entry point to address issues of climate justice. So I think I've taken my 10 minutes completely, but that's where I would stop. Thank you.
Any quick question? Yes. 3 questions, please. Can you raise your hand once again? She couldn't see. Yeah. No, please go ahead. Please go ahead. You have
Thanks.
to keep your eyes here because there were people who raised.
Thanks for giving us such a different narrative to water access and this one. Just I have a curiosity that the urbanization led to the upper caste women to come out from the. So did you look into the only Rajput community? There are other different caste community. There are the certain practices that don't go out and all. So this your study was limited to that only. Yeah, you have looked into the cross across all the societies who is living into that area. That's the only.
Yeah, collect the questions. Anybody? Yeah, please go ahead.
Let him answer this question, then I will be.
Yeah,
Okay. So, looking after your slides, I think some aspect you might have missed, or you are focusing on certain very limited area, because for gender things and the water burden, you can say the economic activities and water usage depend on the geographical area. It is, on you're working on. Like for Gurgaon, it is maybe very different. What is it is happening in the Mukteshwar. I have been to these places physically myself. So other thing is the cultural aspects. Because you're talking about the gender, in some culture the women are given more priority. Women population are more than the male. Certain thing is like for the Gurgaon, I think the migrated population should be also be considered, both for the skilled and unskilled people, and it also define the type of occupation they are offering that place, because in the gender things comes aspect that comes.
Hi, thank you for this very nice perspective, important perspective. My question is more how, if you can share some thoughts on how this perspective can be brought into the mainstream discussion on climate adaptation. Yeah, any thoughts on that?
Okay, so I think let me start with the third one. So so I think one of the agendas or one of the focus of this conference is also about steering away from or rather moving towards nexus thinking and action research. So I think I mean the whole peri-urban problematic is that this kind of issues arise because we look at rural and urban as disjointed entities. Yeah, and that is why maybe an urban planner is not able to predict what kind of effects the choices that he's making will have on gender relations around natural resources. But that's too far-fetched. That's too far-fetched a thought for him. So I think that maybe more action research and peri-urban is a space that requires a lot of very intense engagement in the field, working with communities, partnering, between NGOs, academics, state agencies. So I think a lot of a very locally nuanced understanding of what is happening in a peri-urban context, because all this is contextual, and then using that as a basis to build capacity, to train, to sensitize urban planners, policy makers. But yes, this requires very grounded, locally contextualized action research. I think that's what I would say. On the first question, yes. So as I said, that of course, one has to look at different segments of the community. But I think in the research, we did look at different segments of the community. But I think the aspect of changing gender relations around water was particularly relevant for the upper caste communities. Yeah, and that is why I spoke about that. The second question, I think, is just a set of suggestions. It's not possible to respond to all of them. And I'm not sure if one can look at all those aspects, yeah, within the framing of a single research. But I think that's more like food for thought. I don't have any specific responses to that. Yeah. All right, thank you.
Thank you so much, Vishal. Okay, the next presenter is Ander Linder, and he'll be talking about integrated postgraduate education for sustainable development. So you have to speak about 45 years of experience in 10 minutes.
Yeah, certainly. We'll try to do that. Thank you for the opportunity to introduce you to this program I'm about to speak of. And I put this quote of Mr. Kofi Annan where I think that fits rather well. And I promise you there are connections to water security, there are connections to climate change and also to policy, if you might wonder why this talk is in this session. So let me start, and you're probably all aware of this concept of the planetary boundaries, where we have the safe operating space in the center, and we are exceeding in quite a number of them. Looking at biodiversity, which is like we are pretty much in the mass extinction of this planet. Looking at novel entities, whether it's plastic pollution in the ocean, or it's, for example, antibiotics in sewage systems in cities. Which is a really big problem, or pretty much how the way we are doing agriculture, to simplify it, running out of phosphorus and polluting our groundwater tables with nitrogen. And we have to find solutions for this, and this is only possible in a multilateral way on a global level. And there are success stories, believe it or not. So if you look at the ozone depletion, and the older ones among us might remember there was the ozone hole in the atmosphere, and there was a big concern, and the global community came together and we were able to scale it back. Yeah, climate change is also there, but considered with the others, it's the easy one. Of course, they are all interrelated, so that's a little bit provocative again. And talking about water, fairly recently quantified that also the green water, like the water available for plants, is now in critical condition. So just, we have to come together on a multilateral way. And if you look back a little bit in history on this multilateral environmental agreement in the past based on UN levels, here a short overview about these starting in the early 70s until now. I will of course not run through all of them, but yeah, UNEP turned 50 years this year. And then maybe the most famous ones, like the Convention on Biological Diversity, where the COP now commenced in Canada, and the United Nations Framework Convention on Climate Change. And if you look at Germany, so in the 70s, we established in Germany our first agency, so the Federal Environment Agency then. We had no ministry by then, most European countries. And then the ministry came later on with another agency on nature conservation. And only in the last elections, we first included the term climate action into one of the names in our ministries. And then there's CIPSEM, what I want to talk about, which was founded in 1977 in the then former Eastern Germany. So what stands CIPSEM for? It's the Center for International Postgraduate Studies of Environmental Management. And this was then implemented as a contribution of the former eastern part of Germany to UNEP. So they cannot afford like the monetary contributions, and they offered this program as a contribution instead. And it runs since then, running these courses at the Technische Universität Dresden, University of Technology in Dresden, and is still going strong in higher education and sustainable management for future decision makers and hopefully potential change agents. This program is still fully funded by the Federal Ministry for the Environment in Germany, and also by contributions of the university itself. So now I will give you some evidence that this is really a success story. So right now we are the numbers, more than 2,600 alumni from 145 countries. We are conducting 3 to 4 courses each year with a maximum of 8 to 4 participants, so 21 participants in each course. And there's a whole holistic and interdisciplinary approach to this, mainly conducted by the School of Civil and Environmental Engineering of TU Dresden, but also of other experts of the university and also external ones. It's based on a modular structure, so you see it's really a holistic approach from conservation and restoration ecology to water and atmosphere, soil and land, and so on, all embedded in basic activities and also like soft skills like how to present, how to produce a policy brief, and this is connected also to a science policy interface, so how to bring this also into action. So normally a year at CIPSEM runs like this. There's a 6-month course on environmental management comprising all these modules, and it's worth 30 ECTS points, and then 3 specialized short courses, which 5 ECTS each. Most of the time they are related to one of those pillars of the modules, more on a specific topic then. And since 2014, this program runs with the blended learning approach, so there is this learning management system was implemented, and it was already, although the participants were in Dresden on site, it was already combined with this blended learning approach with this digital learning management system, and this helped tremendously when the pandemic hit. So we transformed a course which was on site full-time in terms of 3 weeks to a full-time online course over 12 time zones. So with asynchronous learning and teaching with the same certificate at the end with the same value, and this is why this was also considered as a beacon project, not only at the university itself, but also we did some counseling for the agencies I just mentioned before, that they can like transfer this approach to other educational courses they have. Of course, this whole thing is embedded in the strategy of our school. So you see here not only the main research areas of the 5 faculties of the School of Civil and Environmental Engineering, but also our values here. And they are also represented at CIPSEM and also connected to other projects being implemented right now or being in development. The ABCD Center is one of them. So for example, when we started, we provided extra scholarships, so additional to those from the ministries from this project then to enable people to participate in these courses. To really create a community and foster a platform for also for South-South exchange, which is rather successful. And if you track our alumni, you meet them regularly on the conferences of the parties, either biodiversity, climate change, and all the others. They're still connected even years after they're back home. They still meet online or prospering in their respective careers. We trace our alumni in a very friendly way, of course. So we made these tracing studies asking our alumni who were with us 5 years ago and 10 years ago, asked them how they are doing. And you see here they end up mainly like in lawmaking positions, governmental positions, also academia, consulting, education. And if you ask them what they learned or what are the most impactful things they got from these courses, you see that the cross-cultural skills improved, they have acquired more up-to-date expertise, more recognition and respect, more responsibility in the job, and so on. So you can really see the impact of this course program. We are making a difference. So this is a picture from fairly recently at COP27. You see 4 young people from Sierra Leone, from Armenia, from the Seychelles, and from Tajikistan. They were all representing their respective countries, and they were all in the same course, in the same year, the same course some years ago. And this is just one indicator that this program really works. Also making some advertisement, maybe you or your colleagues are interested in joining this network, this community. So in the upcoming season, so the next short courses in the second half of 2023, these are the topics the proposed topics. They are not definitely confirmed, but it's very likely that this will be the offered short course topics, and then the next long course in January from July, where you can apply for from February, March 2023 on this website. So, this is a picture from the 45th anniversary celebration back in Dresden. If you have any question, I'm happy to answer this. Thank you very much for your attention.
The courses you mentioned, like in the last slide.
They are on. Most of them are on site, so they are all fully funded. So selected participants get a full scholarship with airfare, accommodation, allowance, everything all inclusive almost. And but some of the short courses will be still offered online. But most of the courses are back to on site, in person for now.
Long time courses.
Yeah, the information, I had the links on the slides, like the overview website where we get all the content and the structure, and then there is the application portal where you can apply online.
Yeah. Thank you, sir.
Is it open for all, or is there a particular background?
It's for experts and decision makers, change agents from the global south, exclusively.
Okay, thank you so much, Ender. And I just wonder where all the alumni are from India who went to take these courses. If you can give us the list, we can follow up with them. All right, thank you so much. So the last presentation is from Britta Hollerman, and and she will be talking about who is adopting and why.
Okay, yeah, welcome to this last but hopefully not least presentation. Okay, I want to start with two pictures showing similar questions. So it's about seasonality, one in an agricultural area and one in a reservoir, is it? And here I'm wondering, so using the variability in seasonality and future climate change, there is a risk. And I think we all now think of how can these systems adapt to climate change and to future climate variability. But I think the more important question is, why people adapt. So in my presentation, I want to shift the focus on from how to the why, because we have the hows in our mind because we know our whys, but we don't know the whys of the people who are living in those systems. And yeah, this is what the talk is about. And I use for this a systems approach, and I think we heard it this morning and we heard it in the last day, that a system approach is very efficient and important for water adaptation and water management. And in this case, I just want to draw that there's kind of equifinality in getting to a decision. So some people may argue to get to this point using this red circle or this green circle. So there's a different reasoning, and I want to use this system to do it in a participatory manner and to get the reasoning of the different actors in the field. For this, I use different elicitation methods together with my team. For example, just expert elicitation, interviews, but the most important are workshops where I work with the participants directly, and they create the qualitative systems and they interact with each other. I brought just some pictures from the Tenanting case study. Here we have our stakeholders, and they interactively in smaller groups created their qualitative system, and they brought their specific backgrounds. For example, some focused more on hydrology, others focused more on economic development, and later all those are discussed and brought together into a big consensus, and it's kind of an eye-opener for many of the participants to get exposed to other views and to integrate this into their decision-making as well. And for the local smallholder farmers, it's kind of hard to get them to workshops. So we go to the field to them and discuss them in focus group discussions. And what we elicited from this, we create the qualitative system from our perceptions of their answers. So there's the first study. This is on Tanzania, and it's at the Kilombero Valley. And it's a very fruitful area, but it's under pressure because there's intra and intra-annual variability in precipitation, especially the starting of the long rainy season makes them specifically prone to crop failure. And here we want to look on cutting spatial scales for the smallholder farmers on the one hand and the regional and national stakeholders on the other hand. And this is what came out in such a system. It's a mess at the moment, but just focus on the red circle here. This is what the stakeholders from the regional and national level came out, and they kind of found two vicious circles, or one circle. So increasing agricultural area destroys natural vegetation, increases extremes, further aggravates the food security, and then increasing again using more agricultural area. And the other one would be going another circle more for conservation and keeping it at a hand. So there's a tension of the land use and climate, land use cover changes and ecosystem integrity at the one hand, with the agricultural expansion conservation, and this is setting in a more social ecological system, for example in food security. And the big issue is about conflicts about land, because you can easily use the land for agriculture or you can use it for conservation, but both is very difficult. There's some kind of agroforest schemes where you can use it, but in general it's not possible. And on the other hand, you see the local perspective, and they are really driven by these conflicts about land, because it makes hard. It decides about how they decide about their farming issues. For example, if they're not sure if they can use this plot in the next season, they might invest not too much into this field, like bunds, which can keep the water inside, and so on. So there's a mismatch of scale, because the regional national perspective, they think of the farmers as a sum who's driving the agricultural area to increase, but the smallholder farmers, they make their own decisions very individually. So they just want to look for surpluses and input and efficiency, and so they look for more food security and livelihood options. So I brought one example here. So there's broadcasting versus inline planting, and inline planting is more time consuming, but it's regarded as most effective, and it's taught in many farmers trainings, and but it's not used and not implemented by everybody, because they have a different balance and say, well, we need our labor for other strands of income. So they have a different agency there. So we have the routine agency who keep to the broadcasting, and then we have others who use the strategic agency based on their socioeconomic assets. And then we have the implementation of adaptation in yes or no. So what's thought of the regional perspective is not always translated into the local area. And this is because there's a lot of uncertainty arising from the socioeconomic backgrounds of the livelihood options, and this need to be taken into account. So, and yeah, just another example. So here we don't have the spatial scale, we have cross-cutting functionalities, and here we can see that they also argue differently on how to discharge water from the reservoir. And the operational management, for example, looks at the shift in precipitation and what is desired. And this desired level is kind of a political consensus in this strategic and political perspective, and they are not working directly with the data involved, but their perception of it. So there's a political negotiation process on the one side and an environmental uncertainty on the other. So uncertainty is very important in that case. And when they try to use their agency, they want to be more flexible in their decisions, the operational management, but then they lose, then the regional or the strategic lose their control. And this is a different combination. But active agents translate their perceived environment uncertainty into opportunity. And I think this is one crucial point, that you can take the uncertainty to create new opportunities. So and here's one of the agencies. This is one agent with more routine, so they don't feel if you know everything but the weather is bad, then you can't do anything about it. So they feel really stuck in their vicious circle of food security and livelihood security. But then there are other farmers who have more agency. They have a community-based irrigation scheme. They just practice forest protection because they see the value out of it, and they are more active. The same is true for active agents in this reservoir example. So they ask for more flexibility. And just to sum it up quickly, so the participatory system analysis sheds light into the reasoning and plurality of perspectives, and by showcasing them to each other, you can understand your partner, and you can find more adaptation measures, and also the interplay of environmental and social and economic and political uncertainties are very important when creating adaptation measures. So I just want to conclude here. So from my point of view, it's very important to understand the heterogeneity of the actors and their uncertainty perception, because this creates their room of action. And so focusing on the why means that adapting on those highly uncertain changes, that it creates opportunities which are used differently by actors, and we need to acknowledge this, and especially the local perception of interplay of environmental and socio-economic uncertainties are important. And when we know this, then we can go to the how, because then we really have made it tailor-made and have a broader spectrum. And potentially it's not always that we look for adaptation in the water itself, but maybe for the case in the Tanzania, it would be getting the land tenure system right, giving the people the security they need to cultivate their land. And with this, I want to close. Thank you for your attention.
Thank you very much. It's a very interesting presentation. Yeah, Joydeep.
Thank you. Dr. Holleman, on your German case study, I would like to know if you have any evidence of the level of uncertainty increasing over time. Do you have time series data on the negotiations over reservoir water?
Any more question, if you can? Yeah.
Okay. Okay, it was. I was talking to the stakeholders and the reservoir managers, and they say currently it's quite hard to estimate, because the models in that region, especially in the middle mountains, point in the future to very different areas, so to different points. So it can get wetter, but it can also get more drier. So yeah, I don't have like this clear evidence there. So this is why it's important. This is a high uncertainty, and they have to prepare for both.
Yeah, please.
You showed you talk about the social ecological system, and you show one slide where various components were sharing certain areas. So how you managed to draw the correlation, the feedbacks exactly with all this multi-category or multi-sector what you were showing in the social ecological system? What technique you used?
During these errors, it was mostly made in the case study by the stakeholders. They were reasoning the way the different components were linked, and it was then supported by looking into literature if this can be confirmed in other cases. And then it was feedbacked to the workshop participants as well when we put it all together so they could see it again, and they were commenting on this. And yeah, in the end we also published it with them together. So they were kind of really involved in this process.
So how you correlated with the ecological system, with the social aspects?
I'm not sure if I get your question.
Can you go to the slide, please?
We don't really have so much time. If you can just ask your question. It's already 12:30.
I am talking about the feedback system in the social ecology system. How you managed to correlate like all those things with the model you showed. Are you getting my question?
Those factors that you showed, how are they correlated? How are you correlating them?
I'm not sure if I get it right. It was correlated from the interviews, from the focus group discussions, and from the workshops.
Yeah. Okay, thank you so much, Britta. Okay, so this actually brings us to the end of the session, and I think given the time constraint, we did quite well, discussing from local to national to transboundary water security issues, and also how can we make policymakers more aware, different kinds of solutions, for example, nature-based solution or approaches. We also spoke about gender lens, bringing gender lens, and I think that's also something very important, although not explicitly spoken in all the presentation, but how do we integrate gender in all of the water security and the impact of climate change on water security. With this, I would close this session and thank you very much to all of you, to the presenters, and also to all of you. Let's end with a round of applause to all of us. Thank you.